Ethan was a man who understood structure. As a senior project manager in commercial construction, he spent his life ensuring things didn't fall apart. He was the guy who could spot a hairline fracture in a concrete slab from 30 feet away. The guy who knew that if the foundation wasn't right, nothing else mattered. Driving his Ford F-150 down the interstate that Tuesday, he had no idea that his own foundation was about to crumble. It started with a fluke of site inspection canceled at the last minute, freeing him up at 4:30 p.m. instead of heading straight home to clearing mails. He decided to be spontaneous. He swung by that high-end sushi place Sarah loved, the one usually reserved for anniversaries. He thought he was being a thoughtful husband. He didn't realize he was driving straight toward a demolition dot to get home. He had to pass the school district headquarters. That's when his contractor's eye caught the anomaly. It was 5:15 p.m. Sarah was supposed to be at her yoga studio across town until 7. Yet, there was her white SUV parked distinctly in the executive lot, right next to a luxury sedan. Ethan slowed to a crawl, the confusion in his gut quickly turning into a cold, hard knot. The side door of the admin building opened, and Sarah stepped out. She looked radiant, smiling in a way he hadn't seen in years. But she wasn't alone. Walking beside her was Greg, the district superintendent. It wasn't a professional exit. There were no files, no distance. As they reached her car, Greg didn't offer a handshake. He reached out and placed his hand possessively on the small of her back, his thumb brushing her fabric. Sarah didn't pull away. She leaned into the touch, giggling at something he whispered. In that split second, the air left the cab of the truck. The sushi sat on the passenger seat, a ridiculous prop in a tragedy he didn't know he was starring in. Ethan gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, feeling that specific, nausea-inducing sickness a man feels when he realizes his entire reality is a lie. The inspection wasn't the only thing canceled that day. His life as he knew it was over. Most men would have slammed on the accelerator. They would have driven that truck right through the executive fencing and started a brawl in the parking lot. But Ethan wasn't most men. Over 20 years in construction had taught him one undeniable truth. You don't fix a catastrophic structural failure by screaming at the concrete. You assess the damage. You secure the perimeter. You formulate a plan. He switched off his emotions like he was tripping a circuit breaker. Total blackout. He watched Greg's luxury sedan pull out, followed closely by Sarah's SUV. Ethan waited 3 seconds, then eased his truck into traffic, keeping a safe distance. He followed them, merging with the precision of a hunter. As they drove 20 minutes in the opposite direction of the yoga studio, they pulled into a sleek, modern apartment complex, the kind with high security and anonymity baked into the lease. Ethan parked his truck across the street, shrouded in the evening shadows. He watched them walk into the lobby, Greg's, and resting comfortably on Sarah's shoulder. Every primal instinct in his body screamed at him to grab the tire iron from under his seat, march up those stairs, and kick the door down. The rage was a physical thing, a fire in his chest demanding to be let out. But he forced it down. He looked at the building, then at his own reflection in the rearview mirror. If he went in now, he'd just be the crazy, jealous husband. He'd be the aggressor. He would lose the narrative. In the silence of the cab, he adopted a new philosophy. Anger is a liability. Evidence is an asset. He didn't need a screaming match. He needed ammunition. He needed a dossier so thick that when the dust settled, there would be no room for her to spin the truth. He drove home in silence. The expensive sushi, the gesture of affection from a man who thought he had a happy marriage, went straight into the kitchen trash. He sat in the living room with his laptop open, staring at a spreadsheet, waiting. When Sarah walked in at 8 p.m., she didn't smell like sweat or a yoga mat. She smelled like lavender shower gel and fresh mint mouthwash. She sighed, dropped in her bag, and launched into a rehearsed story about a budget crisis and endless, exhausting meetings. Ethan just nodded, looking at her not as his wife, but as a hazardous variable he was methodically preparing to remove from the equation. For the next 4 days, Ethan became a ghost in his own life. He went to work, sat through side meetings, and came home to eat dinner across from his wife, all while running a covert operation that would make the CIA proud. Sarah had made the classic mistake of the arrogant. She got lazy. She assumed Ethan was just the oblivious husband, too tired from work to notice the details. She forgot that they shared a cloud storage plan. For family photos, a plan she hadn't properly secured, Ethan sat in his home office late one night, ostensibly bidding on a new high-rise project. In reality, he was recovering deleted data. When the files started repopulating, it was like watching a car crash in slow motion. The texts appeared first. Hundreds of them. Reading them was a different kind of torture. It wasn't just the betrayal of the act. It was the sheer disrespect. He found a photo Sarah had taken of him sleeping on the recliner after a 60-hour week. His work boots still near the door. Her caption read, "Passed out again. Living the dream with Mr. Excitement." Greg's reply made Ethan's blood run cold. You need a man who can keep up with you, not one who smells like drywall and exhaustion. She had mocked the very labor that paid for the roof over her head. She called his stability suffocating and his loyalty boring. That was the moment the last shred of guilt left Ethan's body. He wasn't destroying a marriage anymore. He was evicting a hostile tenant. But Ethan didn't just want a divorce. He wanted leverage. He looked at the profile of the man destroying his home. Greg, the flashy superintendent with the leased BMW and the $500 haircuts. Men like Greg, who risked their careers for thrills, rarely stopped at just one risk. Ethan hired a private investigator. While he didn't pay him to follow Sarah, he already knew where she was. He paid the pie to tail Greg on the days Sarah wasn't with him. The report hit Ethan's inbox 48 hours later, and it was worth every penny. It was the smoking gun that turned this from a tragedy into a trap. The surveillance photos showed Greg at a wine bar on the other side of the county. He wasn't alone, and he wasn't with Sarah. He was with Jessica, a 29-year-old art teacher from the district. Greg wasn't Sarah's soulmate. He was a predator playing the field, juggling to women from his own payroll. He was playing Sarah for a fool just as hard as she was playing Ethan. Ethan printed it all. He approached the compilation of evidence with the same rigor he applied to structural engineering. He created a physical dossier, what he silently called the briefcase of doom. Section 1, Sarah's texts and location data. Section 2, Greg and Sarah. Section 3, Greg and Jessica. Section 4, credit card statements showing district funds used for personal dinners. He organized the papers into clear sleeves, tabbed and categorized. It was meticulous. It was undeniable. It was time to go to work. Tuesday night came around, and the pattern held. Ethan tracked the GPS to that same apartment complex. This time, he didn't park across the street. He parked right next to Greg's luxury sedan. He didn't wait in the dark. He walked straight to the front door. It was unlocked, a testament to the arrogance of two people who thought they were untouchable. Ethan stepped inside. The soft jazz music playing in the living room cut out instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. When Greg walked around the corner and saw Ethan standing there, the color drained from his face. Sarah appeared a second later, her eyes widening in pure terror. She started the script almost immediately. The gaslighting she'd likely rehearsed in her head 1,000 times. Ethan, wait, it's not what it looks like. Ethan didn't yell. He didn't throw a punch. He spoke with the flat, dangerous calm of a man who had already won. Save it, Sarah, he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. The lawyer already has the file. The divorce petition was filed 20 minutes ago. Sarah froze. But Ethan wasn't done. He turned his gaze to Greg, who was trying to stammer out an excuse about professional discussions. Ethan just smiled, a cold, humorless expression. Tell me, Greg, he asked, does Jessica know you're here? The confusion on Sarah's face was immediate. Who is Jessica? She asked. Ethan didn't answer her. He simply opened the folder he was carrying and handed her the photos. Page after page of Greg with the 29-year-old art teacher. Dates that alternated perfectly with Sarah's schedule. Ethan watched as Sarah's face crumbled, not because she had destroyed her marriage, and not because she had hurt her husband. She broke because she realized she wasn't the love of Greg's life. She was just a Tuesday appointment. She had blown up her life for a man who was playing her for a fool. You deserve each other, Ethan said, turning to the door. Oh, and Greg, the school board receives a full copy of this folder tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Violating policy 400 regarding supervisor relationships implies immediate termination. Good luck with that. He walked out, leaving them in the ruins of their own making. The fallout was swift and absolute. Because Ethan had kept his head and protected his assets, the financial damage was minimal. The house was premarital property. Sarah walked away with almost nothing but her regret. Greg was fired within the week for ethics violations. When Jessica found out she was part of a rotation, she publicly dumped him on social media, tagging the district. Sarah was demoted, stripped of her administrative power, and left to wander the halls of a school where everyone knew exactly what she had done. Ethan allowed himself exactly one moment of weakness. Sitting in his truck after the final mediation, he broke down. He cried for 10 minutes, not for Sarah, but for the 12 years he had invested in a structure built on sand. Then, he wiped his face, started the engine, and drove to the gym. He poured his pain into iron. He poured his focus into his career. He leveled up. 2 years later, the past felt like a story someone else had written. Ethan was walking through the aisles of a local hardware store on a Saturday morning. He wasn't alone. Beside him was Maya, a woman he'd met 6 months prior. She was kind, feminine, and looked at Ethan with the genuine admiration that Sarah had lost years ago. They were laughing about paint colors when Ethan stopped, coming down the aisle. Pushing the cart with a single, flickering wheel was Sarah. She looked tired. The vibrant, arrogant woman from the apartment was gone. She looked like she had hit a wall, lines around her eyes, shoulders slumped. Driving a beat-up sedan, he could see through the window. She was alone. She looked up and locked eyes with him. For a second, he saw a flicker of hope in her expression, a sad, tentative smile as if she wanted to bridge the gap, to acknowledge their history. Ethan didn't scowl. He didn't get angry. He simply gave her a polite, indifferent nod, the kind you give a stranger in traffic, and turned back to Maya. He put his hand on Maya's back, guiding her toward the checkout. He didn't look back. Sarah was a ghost, a closed chapter in a book he had finished reading a long time ago. I used to think that losing her was the end of my world. Turns out, it was just an eviction notice for a bad tenant. I rebuilt my foundation, and this time, I used better materials. Gentlemen, don't ignore the red flags. Don't fight for someone who won't fight for you. Build your value, protect your peace, and never be afraid to walk away. If you enjoyed this story, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. How would you have handled the confrontation? Don't forget to like the video, share it with a friend who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice and redemption. See you in the next one.